The Cone of Glass and Fire. Chapter 15. Freezing at the Pump. And indeed, work for Harry began to seem more normal as the weeks crept by. He got used to the drink routine not just for himself, but for all the team. Important as he enabled them to make as much glass as possible, so they all earned more and felt able to cope with the searing heat. He started to know just when the breaks were going to come and became part of the banter that took place when crews came out. This was a necessary thing for them all too, well meant, no malice, but to create a different world for them on the outside, a world of fun, like boys at school, but much, much bigger, and it joined them all together somehow, all the men of each chair and cone one. Thus they could cope with the demands of their highly skilled working day. It had surprised Harry at first that the men used this way of coping, but he fell into it easily, still being a boy himself at heart, and seeing that in part many of them were too, when they could be, and only by themselves. For example, if any of the higher-ups were around, the banter ceased immediately, and a serious demeanour was expressed by all. It was important that the bosses realised their intelligence and took them seriously. This was unspoken, but obvious to them all. Also, if any of the women happened to come by or had anything to tell them, a slightly more respectful attitude came over the group, and any cussing ceased. Though depending who it was, they may have joked with her a little. However, if inadvertently one of them swore without realising a woman was there, he would apologise immediately. Harry was so pleased to see this. One day his mum came by as Aunt Jane had dropped off his bag in the lining room. He had forgotten it in his haste to leave in the morning. Straight away the banter and cussing stopped, except they told her about young Harry and his artistry, joking about what he must be like at home. She looked at him queerly. He never drew anything at home any more. Yet she didn't say that. Being mum, she didn't even talk to him about it when he got home. He himself was coping better, less tired in the evenings, although still needing a kip before tea, and he found he was dreaming less of constantly being inside the cone. Quite a relief in the end, as he found he really needed to find life outside again, so that he could keep enjoying his working life. At lunch times, he would sit drawing on the bench or use a piece of wood to hold his paper. He got plenty of banter, many comments like, "So you're still in the Royal Academy, are you?" and so forth, which he took with a laugh. But as the weeks went on and he persevered, his drawing became a subject of admiration for some, and perhaps a little jealousy from others. He counted this, becoming able to do quick sketches of people or scenes. The men would exchange glances, eyebrows up, a quick nod, not so bad. Unexpected skill in a young 'un, and one who didn't blow his trumpet. He drew pictures that amused them all, such as an enormous Clary standing in his usual pose, pointing one of his huge sausage-like fingers, saying, "And another thing." Even Clary liked it and put it up in his office. He also drew birds, remembering them from his prize book, and flowers and cows from the meadows. Some of the men liked to take them home for their country wives. Then he started drawing scenes from Stirling's itself, the courtyard, the men at lunch, memories of inside the cone. So things took on their own rhythm. Life moved on and on to November. Harry was now getting extra lessons in mathematics, grammar and science. The nights were drawing in deep, the grey days more and more chill. Washing under the pump on the way home started to become raw, the water bitingly cold, so that Harry shivered with teeth rattling the rest of the way home. He felt as though he could not say to Jane that he could not take it any more. Not with the personal pride she held in the house and the personal pride he had in his sense of manliness, growing as it now was in his older environment. Yet the day he had that very thought, as she saw him coming home, her eyes widened, and out she came and hurried him in. "Get inside, lad. You'll catch your death." Immediately she dragged his dry jacket off but wet shirt and stripped his wet shirt from him. "Come on, get this round you." Eyes anxious, she put the several-coloured crochet blanket, made of many squares, sewn together around his shoulders and rubbed him vigorously dry. Come on, get by the fire, take those trousers off. Now, don't you worry, I've seen it all before." And she made him dry off, there and then in front of the range. He was weary, so much he could hardly stand. She fought to hold him up, as tired as he was, but managed pulling and pushing him to the rocking chair. Though realising that she wanted the chair nearer to the fire, she struggled to maintain her grasp on him while manoeuvring the chair to her desired position. Yet, being Jane, she somehow managed it, before letting him collapse in the chair, wrapped in blankets from head to foot. Tea was administered, with plenty of sugar immediately. "Get your hands round that, lad," which he did with the utmost pleasure, although this day he was so tired he couldn't think, and he began to feel his world going round and round and round. She held the mug to his lips. He had been "lad" since he came in. She'd not said his name. It meant she was worried, he vaguely realised. "I've seen this before. You might have been coming down with summat, and this cold and wet has let it in. Why have you been washing at pump still? The weather's been getting so cold. I meant to say." He couldn't answer. "I blame myself for not spotting this before," she cried out, taking the mug away and hugging him to get the bitter chill out of his bones. He had, as she predicted, come down with summat, and it turned out feverish. His fiery dreams had taken him to the depths of hell, enormous cones where devils appeared, then a heartless, cold pump freezing him to the core so his shivers knew no end. Pictures in his mind, Bill and his own anxiety, how he had to tell him of his illness but could not find the gaffer when he tried. Yet he heard his broad Lancashire, quiet and gentle somehow, telling him not to worry. Mum also quiet, holding Jane's hand. Jane crying, her face framed as if in a picture. Why was she like that about him? The girls, Poppy and her rosy looks. In his dreams, he wanted to ask her to give him some rosy looks too. Charlie, trying to hug him, a little concerned, and a concerned Abby even, or Jane holding her, and his little Bobbin was crying. He wanted to comfort her, but he could not get there. Strangely, it was hell again. He never saw angels. Have I been that bad, he thought. But slowly he came back to them all, realising his bed was soaked with sweat. They burned most of his bedding as a precautionary, despite the cost. As Harry's illness began over the weekend, Bill was warned well in advance to find another lad if he could. He tried for Jamie, which surprisingly the young man took. A week before he was due to make his trip, Jamie had received a devastating letter. A cousin in Ireland wrote, "Famine, caused by a terrible new potato blight, was raging across the country." Jamie's cousin was emigrating to America, and he warned Jamie in the strongest terms not to come, as he believed things could only get worse. The year was 1844, and sickeningly, corn that could have saved many families was still being exported by large English landowners. Jamie felt as though a cannonball had gone straight through him. All his plans had come to naught, and his beloved country, his lovely nation, was laying waste, and he could do nothing except to send a few shillings to help his people. As for the Irish glass industry, it was on its knees. Many glass workers were on their way to America or to England. Fortunately, many new firms were starting up around the Stourbridge area, but many were making bottles or glass of a lesser skilled nature via the new pressing mechanical sort of process. The machine still required skill to operate, as exactly the right amount had to be gathered and put in by hand. Yet there were nothing as skilled as proper blowing, and of course wages were much lower than for blowers of the grade required by Sterling's. Therefore Jamie wanted to get so much back into his old firm, which wasn't easy with the influx of new workers arriving. This few days working with Bill might make a difference. Jamie had served his apprenticeship at Sterling's. He was a Sterling's man. They knew him. They knew he was reliable, skilled, and someone who understood about standards. It was his chance. This did not mean that Harry was out. No, he would go back to his place when Bill had, was ready and when he had recovered. But Sterling's was expanding too. There was a new double furnace being built, not a cone, looking more like an iron furnace, if anything, but with a sort of like a cone inside, seemingly. It's strange to describe, but it had larger capacity, and Sterling's needed new staff. So hopefully Jamie was back in, but he was still a rather sad, disconsolate Jamie at the moment. As Harry recovered, and did not seem dangerous to others, Jamie came to see how he was. He told him about what was happening and his own inability to go to Ireland. He tried to cover over his feelings, but Harry was aware of his doleful mood. in contrast to his previous ebullience. He was shocked about what Jamie told him about families beginning to starve. They seemed helpless to stop it. They had no money. In fact, his illness had drained his own family severely, though Mum and Jane seemed to have enough tucked away for a little somehow. Definitely more than he had thought they had, yet he knew he must go back to work as soon as he possibly could, otherwise things would get very bad very quickly. Jamie fortunately had a stroke of well-needed luck. His time with Bill at the firm was enough to remind the management of his existence as he had hoped, especially with Bill pushing. The lad landed one of the new Sterling's jobs, which would begin the following month with final preparations in the new furnace building, followed by a position as a blower in a team with other Irish workers. His relief knew no bounds, though he was still depressed about what was happening in Ireland. He had saved just about enough to make it until his job began and was trying to find a few weeks' work somewhere else to fill in. However, he also still needed to find somewhere else to live. The pharmacist had relet his room in anticipation of him going to Ireland, and he had made it clear Jamie had to go. At a loose end he came to see Harry a few times. One day the girls were over at a friend's who were helping Jane and Sal out to make things easier for the family during Harry's illness. Jane and Mum gave Jamie some tea as Harry was sleeping, and they themselves were sociable and found it very thoughtful of the lad to take such an interest in his friend. Jane asked him if he might come on the morrow, as Harry was improving and would be probably able to see him then. "I'm afraid not. I have to go and see a lodging house, Miss Jane, but I don't hold out much hope, as I fear it'll be too expensive. With all workers coming in, things are getting dearer and dearer. I can only afford go to 10 or 11 shillings. I really need to save some money, and also I've got to get myself some new clothes. I keep growing, you see." Jane looked at Mum. 10 or 11 shillings would be almost a fortune for them. It would pay for some extra schooling for Harry, and maybe a little more. They both laughed at his joke about growing. Mum said Harry was always doing that too. When Jamie had gone, Jane said to Mum, "How could we do it?" First, a sheet across where the lads would sleep, perhaps. I fear we'd have to get another bed if he was paying all that much, but there are plenty knocking about second hand." "Are there? Where from?" "Oh, the pawn shops, you daft, not redeemed. My God, I don't want to put the lad in the pawn shop, want it to be crawling. Not after I'd get hold of it wouldn't." "Well, that's true. You'd clean it to kingdom come. It'd smell of fumigation for a whole month. Aye, and then some, but better clean." They went up to see how Harry was, taking him the ubiquitous brew. He was just waking. They helped him sit up and drink a little tea. "Jamie was here to see you tonight." "Oh, I missed him." "He seems really nice, a good character. What do you think on him, lad?" Mum asked. She was never like this. And why had both of them come upstairs to see him at the same time? "Well, yes, he is." And he told them about how the friendly Irish lad had looked after him during his watching week, how much easier he had made it, and how well Bill thought of him. That was it. "We were thinking," Mum continued, that seeing as he's looking for somewhere to live at the moment, and seeing as how we just about got the space, we could get an extra bed in, and Harry chipped in, a rueful look on his face. Put a sheet up maybe, then a bit more of a wall, seeing as the landlord never calls here and he doesn't care so long as the rent's paid on time. How did you know? Mum and Jane asked in almost perfect time. Well, I thought of it weeks ago, but wasn't sure you'd like the idea. I was also thinking, he added, that we really should have Mr. Craven and his brother Thomas to tea in the evenings, rather than them taking some dinner down the road. The girls would benefit, their English would get better, and it would be more company-like, sociable. And if Jamie lodged here, it really would be very sociable, more like at the farm, and I was thinking how much you seem to like that. He found the long speech exhausting. Mum took his cup and helped him get a little more comfortable. You could be in sales one day, Harry, or near enough. Aunt Jane looked at him in all seriousness. Ugh, he replied at the very thought. It wasn't him at all. Mum took a note into Jamie that day, which was sent across to the Cone, and another to Bill to say that Harry would hopefully be back the following day, he said, though the women were not sure this was a good idea. Jamie cleaned up and came over to the house. It was all decided within an hour, and Aunt Jane also